Absolutely.
What do you say to somebody who says that you seem to let President Trump off the hook for a lot of these things? Because Trump is, after all, the one that pardoned all those people that you're talking about, and you're the first Republican I've seen make the connection between the thin blue line, make the connection between Back the Blue, and what happened January 6th.
Jake,
a lot of Republicans don't want to talk about that.
I went to the Senate. I walked around this building for a week telling every one of these Capitol Police officers who are professionals, keeping their emotions clear. I said, what the president did sucked, and I want you to know it. And then I got to thinking, I probably should elevate that by going to the floor and saying the same thing, and I did that. And I think I have a number of members here who disagreed with the pardons who didn't. So this is, it's something that I went and feel very strongly about.
Yeah.
I mean, I was here. I was the last member out of the chamber on January 6th. I saw everything unfold, and I'm still angry about it. And I have no tolerance for anyone. The president should know if there is anyone coming up for a nomination through any committee of my jurisdiction that excused January the 6th, that they're not going to get confirmed in my remaining tenure in the U.S. Senate. Absolutely.
Damn, so that is retiring Republican Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina, who recently announced after one too many feuds with Trump that he would be ending his career. And he hinted in previous public remarks that he would be more rebellious against the Trump administration moving forward. And in this interview with CNN, he gets pretty damn blunt, humiliating Trump pretty explicitly at times. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, this is near and dear to my heart because I'm a resident of North Carolina. I think that Thom Tillis is part of the problem. He is one of the better Republican politicians, but of course, that's not saying much at all. As Jake Tapper led with that question, Tillis is obviously personally disgusted by January 6th. I don't take that for granted at all. I believe he's sincere, but Tillis grades Trump on a curve. Now, he's probably less inclined to do so now, given that Trump effectively pushed him out of the Republican Party. But I think Jake Tapper's right. Hey, listen, you wouldn't be dealing with Trump with kid gloves, as you have been, if it had been a Democrat who did what Trump did on January 6th and then pardoned violent insurrectionists afterwards. That is true. So I want to be clear. Thom Tillis is still not a great person, and North Carolina and the U.S. Senate are better served by having a Democrat in that position. And hopefully, former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper, who just ended his second term just last year, hopefully he will be running to take Tillis' spot. So fingers crossed, it's not been confirmed yet. But I was stunned. A Republican having a sit-down interview with CNN. Trump hates CNN. He's threatening to prosecute CNN. And again, he gets pretty real during this conversation. Here's another clip.
Come together.
What does the Republican Party need to do to get its message right? Less fealty to one man?
I have fealty to ideals. I don't have fealty to any one man. And I do believe that we're doing the president a disservice. President Trump, nor any president, could possibly be expected to have a detailed understanding of all the things that they have to deal with. What the president needs to do is start really looking at the outcome of some of these policy decisions and ask himself, is he really getting the best professional advice? That's what I've been trying to provide him for the last few years, and that's what I'm going to continue to provide him. And it's worth what he paid for it. But as somebody who's been in elected office for 20 years at the leadership level in the state house and doing all I can up here, I hope that he starts listening to more of us and fewer of those people who pretend like they're the president when he's out of the room over in the White House.
Who are you talking about?
There will be plenty of time for me to cover that later.
Stephen Miller. He's obviously talking about Stephen Miller, Deputy White House Chief of Staff. In the absence of Elon Musk, Miller has stepped up into the void, becoming basically the worm tongue to Trump's King Theoden, to use a Lord of the Rings reference, right? The one whispering into his ear and, puppeteering things behind the scenes. Miller is the disgusting white nationalist architect behind Trump's cruel and draconian mass deportation policies, right? So it's clear, pointed reference to Miller, but Tillis seems to be indicating that he will be more vocal as he gets near the end of his term and perhaps even post Senate career with a memoir, right? But hopefully he drops more firebombs like these. But what's interesting is that's embarrassing for Trump, because what Tillis is saying in a rather diplomatic way is that Trump is a puppet president. Trump is being led around by the nose by people who are nefarious, sinister, people like Stephen Miller or Elon Musk, for that matter. Elon Musk was the shadow president before Stephen Miller, that Pete Hegseth is taking all sorts of liberties, as we discussed in a previous video yesterday, and not even informing Donald Trump of critical decisions. So between Miller and Hegseth and Elon Musk and others, Trump is just predisposed to being manipulated by more intelligent people. They're all smarter than Donald Trump, unfortunately for Trump. But anyway, that was very interesting. Again, telling on Donald Trump, like, yeah, you're too much of a weak moron led around by smarter, more nefarious actors. Here's another clip.
You mentioned earlier that you thought President Trump was getting bad advice, not just about this bill, but also maybe about some of his nominees. You ultimately voted for both RFK Jr. for HHS Secretary and Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary, even though your vote was not guaranteed until the end there. Do you regret those votes now that you've seen them in office?
Well, first, I need to set the record straight on Hegseth. I had already informed my conference that I was going to defer to the Senate Armed Services vote. If he got a unanimous vote out of Senate Armed Services, then I was going to defer to them. I was on that committee for several Congresses, but then there was that allegation that came out on that Sunday. It was net new information. I complete my due diligence. And so I interviewed a number of people. I was called over to the White House on the Thursday night asking me to vote for them. I said, I may. The vote's not till tomorrow. I've still got to complete my due diligence. And quite honestly, there were conversations that I had on Friday that made me put this allegation in the same category as the other ones that I'd worked on before he was confirmed. Now,
this had to do with the abusive tactics towards women? Or
that's right. Yeah. But what it came down to is, honestly, there was never an example of an eyewitness corroborated account. And I had to be fair to Pete Hegseth on that issue. Now, with the passing of time, I think it's clear he's out of his depth as a manager of a large, complex organization.
Yeah, what was your reaction to the Signalgate situation?
Well, that's just one. I mean, this whole idea of having a pause in Ukraine defensive arms, right. That's just amateurish. I mean, that's from somebody who doesn't understand large organization dynamics. So, I don't regret the decision I made back then based on the facts as I knew them then. But today I am beginning to wonder if maybe Armed Services was a little bit generous with respect to their assessment of his capabilities as a manager of the world's largest, most complex, and arguably consequential organization.
So you don't regret it, but if you had to do it again today, you probably wouldn't vote yes?
I think based on the information I have today, if all I had was the information on the day of the vote, I'd certainly vote for him again. But now I have the information of him being a manager, and I don't think that his probationary period's been very positive.
So again, this is what I mean. I don't want anyone to walk away thinking, wow, what a good guy Tillis is. Again, he's treating the situation with kid gloves, right? He's being brutal for a Republican politician. But again, I want you to imagine that this were a Democratic Secretary of Defense appointed by a Democratic president. Would Tillis be quite so generous with the benefit of the doubt? No. Tillis is also trying to defend himself there, too. The fact of the matter is, Hegseth's lack of relevant experience and qualifications were a matter of public record at the time. So I'm not sure. Tillis's argument's basically like, damn, this guy sure doesn't know how to run a complex organization. Yeah, asshole, we knew that about Hegseth at the time. There was no indication that he could run a complex organization at the time. You voted for him because at the end of the day, it was about political expedience. And obviously you had principled reservations, and I do believe that. I just think, unfortunately, Tillis is one of those people where unlike a pure sociopath who has no sense of like personal principle, I think, unfortunately, Tillis is the sort of person who, out of fear for Donald Trump and partisanship, he's willing to squash principle time and time again to benefit Trump, and he's just at the end of his tether. But Hegseth was a disastrous choice from the very beginning, and Tillis should not have voted for him. But we'll never hear him say he regrets it. Here's another clip.
And I've probably done it more than many. Every time I'm very frank with him, but he has never been untoward, never raised his voice.
He just goes on social media and does it.
Yeah, well, that's the first time he ever did. And so after he did that, I told the president that he's clearly got the votes, that I will try and work to get something done in the House. He didn't need my vote, and that I would be respectful and quiet and try to do my work on the House side. And then I got that text that I texted him, or I saw I'd never read it, but I saw like the first sentence. I told the president and another text, I said, now it's time to start looking for my replacement because I don't deal with that kind of bullshit.
And what did he say to that?
He texted back, I am, and I think subsequent to that, he started taking interviews. He needs to, because it's going to be a tough race in North Carolina. We got to get a good candidate, and I'm committed to helping the president get that candidate elected. If it's not, well, let's say a handful of people that will never make it in a general election in North Carolina.
Yeah, well,
So again, I think he's right that North Carolina is going to be a tough fight for the Republicans. It's the best pickup opportunity for the Democrats, and hopefully they succeed in this respect. Hopefully Roy Cooper, again, former Democratic governor, runs for office. That would give Cooper at least the advantage out the gate. And Trump's instincts for selecting general election candidates is atrocious. He backed Kari Lake. He backed Mark Robinson here in North Carolina for the gubernatorial race. And Mark Robinson was the one who was exposed as the self-professed black Nazi. Who was, typing out all that stuff on those porn websites. So, yeah, listen, I'm not here to lionize Thom Tillis. I think Thom Tillis is not a good guy by any stretch, but I love the fact that he's actually calling Trump out. However more brutal I wish he would be, still saying, I'm not going to put up with this bullshit. Trump's basically a puppet president. Hegseth has been a disaster. In a different clip, he says that he's not a big fan of RFK Jr., but he deferred to RFK Jr.'s nomination because Bill Cassidy, a fellow Republican senator, I believe from Louisiana, who is a physician, vouched for RFK Jr., right? So he's like, I just deferred to Cassidy on this one. Obviously, that was a mistake. So this is good. More of this, please. People need to extract more sound bites and more, pithy one-liners from Thom Tillis as he prepares to leave, and hopefully he will start meaningfully rebelling from the Trump administration and Donald Trump more often, and that would help impede potentially some of Donald Trump's disastrous agenda. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.